Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this class. One of the things I've said would never do is put up videos and such because, you know, a lot of what I do, especially my World of Inkjet paper presentations and such, you know, it's kind of like going to a wine tasting, but not being able to taste the wine. Well, you know, when it comes to printing, you know, as many of you have heard me say before, the industry hasn't done a very good job at teaching us how to do it. And there are, unfortunately, during COVID, I've seen a lot of videos of people who are much better looking than I am, who speak more clearly, who are producing videos with very high production value and tell you to do things that I would never, ever tell you to do. It's a bunch of people out there trying to be internet rock stars. I have no intention of being an internet rock star, but as many of you are aware, I do teach a very popular class at Los Angeles Center of Photography called The Fine Art of Digital Printmaking. And as such, we are learning how to use the Canon large format printers, and we're learning how to use programs to print with. In the past, I have used a program called Professional Print and Layout, which was a free program supplied by Canon for use on their pro level printers and also many of their consumer level printers. That program is being phased out. It will continue to be updated in terms of compatibility for operating systems, but it is no longer able to be used with the latest generation of Canon Pro Series printers, which I have here. I have a Canon Pro 4100. I know some of you have Canon Pro 2000s and 4000s. The program we're going to be using today, Professional Print and Layout, can be used on your printer as well as all of the latest generation Canon printers. Print Studio Pro cannot be used on the latest generation Canon printers. So it's really important moving forward to learn this new program. And this new program is what I call Print Studio Pro on steroids. It does everything Print Studio Pro did, but also a lot more. So the purpose of recording this video is to make it available to LACP members as they want to come in and use the Print Lab. At some point, cross your fingers, in the near future, the Print Lab will be open once again. And of course, people who like to take my class, you know, want to kind of get a preview, this video will also be available to them. And as Janice said, for members who, you know, people who subscribe to our LACP YouTube channel. I did a class a few weeks ago on Epson print layout for those out there who have later model Epson printers. Epson's kind of copied Canon along the way in this regard. It isn't as full-featured as Professional Print and Layout, but that video's been up there and I've directed people to it and they're like, wow, you've answered all of my questions and using my Epson printer. So hopefully this will also answer many of your questions in using Canon printers. So I am going to, and again, I just want to remind you, because this is being recorded, rather than just typing things in the chat, as I describe things and you have questions, I think those questions really do add to the conversation. I've seen so many videos where it's just somebody talking and demonstrating the program. I find it's really valuable in all of the workshops and presentations that I do, that when people interject and they ask a question at the time I'm describing something, that it helps others because other people might have exactly the same question. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and I'm going to minimize that. So if we go to, at LACP, this program's already going to be loaded for you. It is available as a free download on, if you go to Canon USA support, I'm just going to go here real quick, kind of show you how to download it for your computer, always go to the official Canon service and support page. I noticed that on many customers that I work with, they have a bunch of ads up here, and there are many fake Canon websites out there who will try to sell you anything from virus protection software to all sorts of other services. Only go to the official Canon service and support page, which is usa.canon.com. When you go here, you can type in the name of your printer. So if you have a Pro 1000, you can type in Pro 1000, you get a pop-up here. Type in Pro 4000, you'll see you get a pop-up here. Another tip, just from personal experience, I'm getting a lot of calls from people saying their color's off or any number of other issues. And it's primarily because people are updating their Apple operating systems to, from Mojave or previous operating system to Catalina to Big Sur. Really important to go to the drivers and downloads page and download the very latest driver for your printer. Especially the last few Apple operating systems have tweaked and changed the print driver a bit. Download the latest driver. So we're at 22.20.0.0, and you select it, download it, install it, and it should, when you run the installer, it will overwrite the current print driver. And you can see if you have the current print driver by going to your system preferences, and this is certainly obviously on an Apple computer. You can go to printers and scanners. And then you can click on your printer that's logged into your system, go to options and supplies, and it says you have the driver version right here. So you could check the version of the driver. Canon does not do a good job at telling you when your drivers need to be updated. It's one of the things I've talked to them about for years. They don't give you alerts. So it's important periodically to go up there and see if new drivers are available. Also, when the driver gets loaded onto your system, Apple, in their infinite wisdom, tries to make everybody wireless. Do not load the AirPrint driver. You see my driver here, it says Canon Pro 4100, and it does not have dash AirPrint. If I try to add my printer again, and I'm on a network here, you'll see here, it could come up, and it depends on your system. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. See here, it says use secure AirPrint. Never, ever load secure AirPrint. Always go to the name of the printer. This happens on both Canon and Epson printers. And if you load the AirPrint driver, it is a limited functionality driver that will not give you all the choices you really need for professional printing. So these are just some little tidbits away from professional print and layout. I hope they're valuable to people. So my print driver is loaded and up to date. The software for professional print and layout is on the software tab. And it is here, professional print and layout. As you can see, Print Studio Pro version 2.2.5 is there. That is the latest version of it. And like I said, they will for a while continue to update that for compatibility for Apple operating systems. But this is the new program. So this is professional print and layout. So you would select it and download it and run the installer. Now, when you run the installer, I'm going to get out of this because we don't really need it. It will install the program onto your computer. And again, I'm going over this for Apple computers. It is really the same thing for Windows PCs. I'm going to go to my Go menu and go to Applications. I love the Go menu, by the way. A lot of people don't know what it is. You could double click on Applications down here in your dock, or, you can activate it by a single click here. You can go other places. I really find the Go menu gets me to go places on my computer very quickly. So you have a folder here in your applications called Canon Utilities. And when you install Professional Print and Layout, it will install this folder here onto your hard drive. And professional print and layout is right there. Now, the neat thing about professional print and layout that I like the most is that it can be used as a standalone application, meaning I could just click on it, I could double click on it, and I also have it down here in my dock, and it opens up, and I can now drag and drop a file into it without having to go through Photoshop or Lightroom. I can literally drag and drop a file into it. The files have to be TIFFs or JPEGs in order for it to be used as a standalone application. Okay, if you have a PSD file, you have to use it, and you want to use it in professional print and layout, you have to use it as a plugin for Photoshop. So you just saw me drag and drop a file into it. It's a miracle. It's great. I'm going to close out of it real quick. I am going to now open up a file in Photoshop. So this is my very famous golden pavilion. So professional print and layout could be used as a standalone application, which I find very useful. And it is the primary way that I use the program now. Again, TIFF or JPEG only. If you have a PSD or a PDF file, I'm going to show you how to open it up from within Photoshop as a plugin for Photoshop.
I have a question. Is it also a plugin for Lightroom?
Perfect question. Yes, it's a plugin for Lightroom.
Okay, and you'll show us that
slightly differently.
Okay.
Now, when I teach, I think, Richard, we've seen each other on various Zoom calls and such, and workshops and presentations I've done, right? I think we've seen each other.
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but if you do,
maybe not. Okay, so
okay.
you're new to me.
Yes.
So this is one of my first rules when I teach. Lightroom is not and has never really been a great printing program. It's a really convenient program for doing 90% of what Photoshop does very easily. When I teach, I discourage people from using Lightroom as a printing program because it doesn't handle two things very specifically. One is color space and the other is size. So generally when I teach people to export out of Lightroom. I use Lightroom all the time. Export out of Lightroom the file that you want at the size you want with the specific color space, whether it's sRGB or Adobe RGB 1998, and then either open it up in Photoshop and print through what I'm showing you now, which is the images here in Photoshop. You go to File and Automate, and you go to Canon Professional Print and Layout, and it will now bring that file into Professional Print and Layout. If you have multiple files open in Photoshop, it will open up all of those files as thumbnails, and you can add them as pages. I'm going to kind of go over that in a little bit. In Lightroom, you get to it by highlighting an image or images and going to File and Plug in Extras. So I'm also not one of those autocratic people that say you can only do it this way. I'm just saying that the more specific way of printing, the method of printing that gives you the best results is printing through this program as either a standalone application or as a plugin for Photoshop. If you want to print through Lightroom and you find that that's convenient, please do that. Don't listen to me. Okay, that's why we have different strokes for different folks. Now, another caveat is that when you originally install this program, I'm just going to get out of this, it only puts it here. Installing the plugin requires one more step. You see a folder here called Install Files. If you double click on that, you see that there is a plugin installer. If you double click on that, it will automatically find the place where to install the plugin for Lightroom. That folder never changes. Okay, it's really easy for it to find the plugins folder where Lightroom houses those files. They're going to say yes. Now, to install it in Photoshop, a little more complicated. The plugin installer has currently only been updated to find the plugins folder for Photoshop CC versions 2020, 2019, 2018. It'll go all the way back to CS5. In order to get it to C 2021, you have to browse for that folder. So if I had I have 2020 installed, I click yes, type in my password. But now it brings you to this screen. So this is the screen where I am now going to search or browse for my Photoshop CC 2021 plugins folder. And I'm also going to tell you this. When you do an update from any major version of Photoshop, if you go from 2019 to 2020, 2020 to 2021, Photoshop creates a new plugins folder, but does not bring your old plugins over. So you have to reinstall your plugins whenever Photoshop updates. And it happens with all plugins. So here I would push next. I'm going to click Photoshop 64-bit, browse, and then I'm going to go find my applications folder.
I'm going to ask you another question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you're going to have to reinstall. You can't drag the plugins from the one folder they were in to the new folder that it creates?
You can.
Can or cannot?
You can, but
Can. Okay.
If there is a new version, I would definitely download a new version of the software. And the reason is that I got to tell you, the transition from Mojave to Catalina was traumatic. The transition from Catalina to Big Sur has been even more traumatic. And the transition from Catalina to Big Sur to Apple computers with the M1 chips, even more traumatic. So my suggestion is, if there is a new version of the software, definitely bring it over. But yes, you could, I'll make this bigger. Like here, this is my plugins folder, right? So I would highlight it, click open and install it there. And you can see there's a folder for PPL. Now here's 2021. Okay, I could go to my old plugins folder here and drag and drop it in there. If it works, great. If not, I would reinstall it. It really depends on your computer. Okay, so these are just some tips for installation. And I don't want to dwell on this because I want to get to the program and really show you how powerful it is and how to use it. But these are, and as I always tell people, if you're a student of mine or you're a customer of mine through Freestyle Photographic Supplies, who most of you know, I'm part of the executive management team there. We are a mail order company, and we have a retail store in Hollywood. By the way, we just moved to a brand new smaller location that is 4 blocks west of where we used to be at 5401 West Sunset. And I've been there for 35 years, and that is my day job. So if you're a customer of ours, or if you are a student of mine through LACP or any number of organizations that I teach, you have basically unlimited access to me. Email me, text me, call me if you have a problem or a question. And I've got to tell you, every time Apple updates their operating system and every time Adobe updates Photoshop, yep, I get a lot of emails, a lot of calls. And I have standard cut and paste. I go, do this, fire it off.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Other than the fact that when you're going from Photoshop and Lightroom, you can use a wider variety of file formats. Is there any advantage to printing from Photoshop as opposed to standalone, other than the file formats options?
No. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Once
Okay.
you're in professional print and layout, you're there. But for instance, if my file is Adobe RGB 1998 at 300 PPI in Photoshop or standalone, it's great. No matter what I do in Lightroom, if I go to Lightroom and go to File, Plugin, Extras, the file's 240. It's 240 PPI. That's why Lightroom just doesn't handle PPI resolution size, right? The file could be huge, you know, or this size, and it's going to scale it to whatever you want. And you want to kind of really size things. I like to be very precise in how I, you know, send my images. So I have them as Adobe RGB 1998, 300 PPI, a TIFF file, all that kind of stuff. In Lightroom, it could be ProPhoto, right? Which is a much bigger color space and not really relevant for digital fine art printmaking, because these files can't, you know, these printers can't print ProPhoto. We can't see them on our monitor. Lightroom makes a bunch of assumptions, but again, if Richard wants to print through Lightroom and he's happy with the results, he should do that. At a certain level, this has got to be fun, right? So,
okay.
You know, I have to defend myself. I mean, that's where I started printing, and I have all these templates. I have templates for every paper and every size and everything. I feel like I have my life in there.
Good.
So
then if you like the results, do that. I mean, I've done a lot of testing. I've done a lot of teaching. I've listened to a lot of people. I've surrounded myself with experts in the field. And I like to say that everything that I present is based on personal experience. It's all about providing you with my career's worth of knowledge. And but if you want to print through Lightroom and you're getting beautiful results, please do that, you know, and hopefully you'll see that there's a lot of functionality in here that could be very valuable. So, okay, so I'm going to click on print, professional print and layout here as a standalone application. So when you start the program here, you see this red line here. This is called a slot. It's a size. When you start the program for the first time, you are on printer default. And you'll see that we're on plain paper. Paper size is A4 because I have, right now you see it's on the Pro 1000. It is giving me a certain series of choices that are specific for the Pro 1000. You'll also notice that I have the Pro 4100 loaded because I have both printers. So when you open up the program for the first time, it's going to ask you to add a printer, and it'll be a dialog, and you simply go here to add printer, and you'll go to find printer, and it'll find all the printers either on your network or via USB, and you can click on them and add them. I'm not going to do that now because I've already done that, but that is the first step. They have to be added, and then they bring over the media settings from the printer. So I'm going to show you some snazzy things that I've done, which I've also, I was over at LACP yesterday to make it easier to for people to use the program. So I'm going to start tracking through here and showing you a bunch of the features, okay? So first we have stored settings up here. So like I said, we have printer default, but then I have all these others. So Richard, when you're talking about templates, I've set up templates here. I've set up all sorts of templates that I can go back to. And I could print multiple images on a page, which I'm going to show you pretty shortly. So I have two printers here. I have the 1000 and the 4100. This was a customer's printer, so ignore that one. In fact, I'm going to delete that one because I don't need it anymore.
I have a question about the settings, the stored settings. Is there a way to delete one you no longer use?
Yeah, there is. You go here to add from print history.
Okay.
It's like a Windows machine. In order to stop, you got to start right here. You go to delete. You click on the one you want. You click delete over here.
Oh, in the stored settings there. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Stored settings there. So you got to go to add from print history and delete.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're going to get me on that one, huh? Okay, so if I have multiple, you're welcome. So if I have multiple printers like I do in my home office here, I have a Pro 1000, Pro 4100. I could print to both printers from this interface without leaving it. So I'm going to switch from the Pro 1000 to the 4100 because part of this, we have the Pro-200 and 4000 at LACP. Those are the printers that I teach on. So I want to kind of go through the settings that are more relevant. And you can see now we have roll papers. So it's changed the configuration of the program for the specific printer that we're printing on. So you see now here in the lower left, it says I'm on a 44-inch roll A4, which is its default setting. Every single thing here is important. A lot of the mistakes that people make when they're printing is that they overlook the importance of settings. So I'm
Eric, I have a question. Yes, yes. Hi. On this, with the stored settings custom, I went down the menu and it's on printer default and I can't get back to custom.
Custom only means that you have deviated from printer default. That's
Oh,
all it means.
so it's okay that I can't get back to custom.
You don't want to get back to custom. Custom is like the beginning of a custom setting.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you don't need to get back to custom.
Okay. Thank
you. So custom, so if you're on printer default and I make any change in here, it goes to custom.
Oh, okay.
It goes to, that's all it means. You're off of printer default now. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm on the 4100 layout mode. Really important. You can print. This whole program has been designed around the concept of being able to easily print multiple images on a page. It has what we call RIP level functionality. For those of you who don't know what a RIP is, people in the past spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on RIPs. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, they were really important for increased print quality and being able to do what I'm about to show you. But Canon has built in this program for free, a beautiful feature. So I'm going to take my golden pavilion again. I'm going to drag and drop it in here. And you can see I'm on single image. If I had other images I wanted to print, I could add a page and I could add another file. It could be a different file. It doesn't have to be the same one, but I can, and you can see there's 2 pages here. So if you had a bunch of images up here, you wanted to print them, you could keep on clicking this button here and adding pages and adding more files. I can also do this. I can go to multiple images. So now
Which is the button you're hitting to add a page?
This one right here, where it's like, it looks like a little page with a plus sign.
Okay, great.
You hover over it, it says add page.
Okay, thanks.
So you can batch print files. So if I had like 10 images down here, I could keep on adding pages and add them in there and push print and they'll all print, which is pretty convenient. You don't have to do one at a time. So now you see I have 2 images because I had 3 images. I had 2 images on this page. There's another one over here. I can add another one if I want. Now, the other thing is I could do this. I can resize images. And I just did this by grabbing the red little, what do they call those? Knobs. And then I could do a copy and I can do a paste. And I can put that up over here now. And I can, and I'm doing a right click and I can do a rotate. So this is something, functionality that people really wanted, so they've included it. You don't have to use it. You don't have to do multiple images on a page, but I do it all the time. And I have templates that I use, especially when I perform inkjet paper psychotherapy sessions and people want, 2 images on a page. I'll just create 2 slots and drop 2 images in there. And it makes it very, very easy. So I'm going to now eliminate. I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to eliminate it. So right next to the add page button, there is a delete page button. And I'm going to go back to single image, which because I had 2 images, it now has 2 pages. So I'm going to scroll over here. I'm going to delete that one. So I'm basically back to where I was with a single image on a page. Now, when I hover over the image, it says that it is 6.653 by 10 inches. Has the file name, it has the PPI, it's an 8-bit file, it's Adobe RGB 1998 in terms of its color space. And then it also has what size that it's going to print at. So when you hover over your files, you have information available to you that you can use in terms of formatting. It also has multiple images auto nesting. That has to do with if you have a 44-inch roll of paper loaded, you can drag and drop images and it will put them in at 100% and it will nest them. It will put them horizontal or vertical or whatever in an economical printing pattern so that you can maximize the printing on the roll. I don't use it that much. I use the multiple images feature much more because I like to really specifically put things where I want. But people like that. And then gallery wrap. This is a feature where you can print an image how you want to for printing on canvas. So let's say I made this a 20 by 16. And if I go to print preview, you see that it's mirroring the image, or you can just expand, continue or just make it bigger, or you can make a white edge or a black edge or any of that kind of stuff. So it has a gallery wrap feature built into it for those of you who would like to print canvas. Okay, so let's continue here. So, so now we're getting into the specific choices you need to make for printing your images in terms of media type, which is number one. This is in every printing program. This choice tells the printer what type of ink, whether it's photo black or matte black ink, to spray on the paper, or a combination. These media types here, you see there's plain paper, coated papers, photo papers, fine art papers, and then a custom menu, which is the really exciting menu. When you first get the printer and all this loaded, you will see many, many more media settings in there than what I have currently. And that is because I have used another program called the Media Configuration Tool, which I'm not going to cover in this because that would be a whole nother session. It allows you to delete media settings from the printer and thus the program. So there could be another half a dozen plain paper settings in there, of which I'm never going to use. So I've eliminated them. Under coated papers, there's a whole bunch as well. Under all of these, there's like 50 or 70 different media settings in there, of which I'm never going to use. But what I have done, and what that program allows me to do, is create custom media settings. So what I've done is I have renamed media settings to the names of the papers that I predominantly use. And I've attached a profile to them. So those of you who have taken my class, I get very frustrated when I tell you, look, when you're printing on a glossy and luster paper, just use Canon Photo Paper Pro Platinum. When you're using a matte paper, use heavyweight fine art. That is hard for people to remember. So now when you come to LACP, you will see a menu that says custom, and you will be able to choose the name of the paper you're printing on. So let's choose one of my favorites, Canson Platine Fiber Rag. And now you have media settings that are the name of the paper. And I went to LACP yesterday and I created over 40 custom media types. The neat thing, I'm going to jump down to the bottom here, is that when I create these in the media configuration tool, you can connect a profile, and for many of you, a custom profile, right, to the media settings. So now, instead of saying, what profile do I use, under here where it says color mode, use ICC profile, and printer profile It says auto now. When I hover over it, look, it has now loaded my custom profile for Canson Platine automatically because it is associated with this media setting. If I go to another media setting for Arista RC Luster, you see here under auto, it has loaded it automatically. So at least at LACP, and if you work with me and I can help you set this up, you can do the same thing. Now you can also click on here, and as you can see, I have 1 million profiles in here, right? I could go search for my profile. It's the same thing as doing this. And I'm going to go find my Arista Luster custom profile, right? There it is. So it's a time saving and efficiency in your workflow that I find is going to be very valuable, and it's going to save time in the class. And it's certainly I found during COVID, as I'm doing inkjet paper psychotherapy sessions and I'm printing all of these papers, I no longer have to sort through my vast library of profiles to go find the one that I want. So this is a new type of file that's created by the media configuration tool, which is a free program on Canon's website under the software tab. It's called an AM1X file. And now when you go to Canson Infinity or Hahnemühle or Moab's website or many of the other manufacturers, they are now providing you with AM1X files that are their generic media files with their generic profiles. So generally, when you double click on them, there's a smaller media configuration tool program called Add Paper. You double click on those files and it will add them to your system and to your printer. But like I said, I don't want to go over that. I just want to kind of focus on professional print and layout. So I'm going to choose, again, Canson Platine Fiber Rag. And I know now that the profile has been loaded, so this makes things a lot easier. Paper size, the default for the printer is A4. I'm going to go to letter. So now remember on the Pro 4100, you have 2 sizes for every size here. You have what I call a vertical and a horizontal. I really have objected to the manufacturers using the words portrait or landscape because that harkens back to those days when portraits were vertically oriented, and your landscapes were horizontally oriented. So when I'm choosing 8.5 by 11, that is because I have an 8.5 inch wide paper by 11 inches tall. If I was printing on a roll, I would want to print 11 by 8.5, because if I printed 8.5 by 11, it's vertically oriented. I'm going to be wasting a bunch on my roll. So typically on a roll, I would want to print 11 by 8.5. And you can see that here. If I go to this button here, this looks like it says switch preview, go to roll paper preview. I'm printing 8.5 by 11. I don't really want to do that. I want to print 11 by 8.5. Right? So, and this is a really hard concept for people to get their heads wrapped around. It's called orientation. How is your file oriented? How do you want to print it? And you want to print it more economically on a sheet or a roll. So when I'm on sheet, I'm going to go here and I'm going to take my paper source and I'm going to do cut sheet. So now I am printing on a sheet, and you will probably when you switch, you will always get this little message that says the original function for roll, such as borderless printing, will be disabled. On the Canon large format printers, you cannot print borderless on sheets. The printer always needs something to grab onto. You can print borderless on the desktop printers on certain supported sizes like 8.5 by 11. On your large format printers, and I'm going to show you here. See, one of the features of Print Studio Pro was you had a button called Display Printable Area, which threw people off sometimes. I am going to show it to you, but you can see right now I'm not centering my image, but you see this light gray area. that denotes the area on a large format printer where it cannot print. It's 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. So if I have, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go to alignment, I'm going to go to center. And if I make my image now bigger, you'll see it's not going to print there. It's going to cut off there. Now, another way to see this is to go File, Other Settings, Custom Settings, and there is a button here for Display Printable Area. Now, this view generally does freak people out a little bit. So now what you're seeing is this dark gray area is the area where the printer will not print. It is, however, your paper. So all of this gray area is white. But people look at this and go, oh, my image isn't centered. It's actually now perfectly centered. It's just not going to, it's just showing you where it won't print. So in Print Studio Pro, this was the only way to be able to see where you couldn't print. Now you have the option of being able to see it this way or going, oh, okay, now I'm seeing the whole page. I just now know that I can't print there. Okay. So we have Canton Platine, we have US letter. Borderless printing is grayed out because you can't do borderless on cut sheet. You can print borderless on rolls. Your paper source cut sheet in the class, which is live, by the way, on the 15th and 16th, we have 9 people signed up, and it will be the first class we teach at LACP as we start opening up for COVID. Which is really kind of neat because my class last March was the last class we taught at LACP before we shut down for COVID. So it was fitting. Okay, so we have cut sheet, roll 1, roll 2, roll paper auto. So on these large format printers, when you buy them just by themselves, they have roll 1. Right? They only have one roll holder. It is the paper loads from the bottom. It does have the ability to add what we call an optional roll, multifunction roll feeder unit, which allows you to have 2 rolls on the printer at the same time. And if you have one that's loaded with Canton Platine and another one that's loaded with another paper, based on the media type, if you leave it on auto, it would switch between those rolls. Yes, you can have both rolls on at the same time, and it would switch from one paper to the other automatically. For all intents and purposes, certainly for the printers at LACP, we're going to be using cut sheet on the first day of the class. We're going to go to rolls later, and no matter what you choose here, there's only one roll holder on it. So it's going to print to that roll. So I'm going to switch here to roll real quick, just to show you what's going on here. This is your roll paper options. You will have to tell the printer what size roll you have, whether it's 44 or 42 or 36 or 24. You have to tell it the width. Automatic cutting, generally people choose yes. So what that does is, depending on the size that you have set, whether it's, 11 by 8.5 or 19 by 13 or 24 by 18 or whatever, it will print at the height. So and it only cuts horizontally, so it's got a built-in cutter in it. And then of course we have print guideline or print cut guideline, so it will not print. If you set it to, it won't print at all. It'll just print, it won't cut at all. It'll just print a dotted line so you can cut it later. If you have automatic cutting no, that means that the printer will get to the end of the print and then it will ask you if you want to cut, and then you say yes, and it will move it into the position that you've set for the paper size, and it will cut at that point. So some people don't want it to automatically cut because either they don't have the basket on or They just want to be able to hold the print where it comes out. They don't want it to fall in the basket. So in that case, you could push no. Most people have push yes. This button here, people have called me who have used the lab in the past, get very confused. If you choose no top, bottom space, save paper, see where I have a border here? It's not going to give you a border. It's going to find the edge of your file and cut it off at about 1/4 or 1/2 inch. So if you choose this and you wanted a specific border, you're not going to get it. So people will use this very often to keep them from making a mistake, right? You've chosen a paper size that's much bigger than your image, and it'll just find the edge of the paper. I really choose not to check that box because I like to make sure what my borders are. So I really suggest don't do it.
Should you use that if you're printing borderless?
No. If you're printing borderless, you click on borderless, and now it just makes the image the size of the width of the roll. So if you go here, you'll see that it's now printing it that way. And then if I want to flip it the other way, I can click here. Right? So it'll print oriented this way, and you could see in the roll paper preview exactly how it's going to print.
Okay.
But no, I don't like that button. Some people do because it keeps them from making a mistake. But if it's borderless, it's borderless. It has nothing to do with it.
All right.
Okay, so, and by the way, I got to this right here by doing a left click in the slot. So this, it's borderless now. So it's making the image as big as the roll. If I click that off, I'm going to go back to image preview here. So I could make this slot size, any of the paper sizes that I want. If my slot size was bigger, let's see here. I'm going to make this 11x14. So, and I'm going to make my image bigger here. I kind of want to show you how the slots work because this is a interesting concept. So I'm going to make my paper size 13x19. I'm going to go back to cut sheet. And see my my slot size is now 11x14, which isn't the proportion of my image. And I can make it bigger and smaller, but you see that the slot is not hugging my image, right? So if I want to make the slot the same aspect ratio as my image, I can go here, and I got a bunch of choices here at the bottom. So fit image for the slot, this is a slot menu, fit to image aspect ratio. So I click on that and see now my slot is the same aspect ratio as my image. But you'll also see that here my image is actually 10 by 6.653. But now the output size is 10.21 by 679, right? So if I want the slot, I'm going to make it even smaller to be the exact same size as my image. We don't have a button yet that says 100%. Okay, so this is how you get your slot size to be the same size as the image size. Now my image is 100% in the slot. Okay, so I went to size. And I went to make the slot size the same size as the image size. So now if I hover over there, you'll see that the image size and the image output are exactly the same. So I'm going to go back to US letter. And as you can see, my image is a little bigger, right? It's still 100%, and it is going to get cut off a little bit. So I can either go back into Photoshop and make the width of the image on the long side to print 100% with an even border on top and bottom or side to side. The size would be 9.4 inches. And I've come to that conclusion by doing this. I can shrink that in and know that that's not going to get cut off. And Look down here. This is my slot size. It says 9.411. So I could type in 9.4, and now I know I'm not going to get cut off. Okay, so continuing here. So we have cut sheet. Roll paper options is now grayed out because we're not on roll paper. I do not like fit to roll paper with because it's just going to shrink, or it's going to increase or decrease the image. I like to be very specific in my image size. Print quality. So on this particular, this choices will vary with media setting. So if I'm on Platine Fiber Rag, which is a core media setting of Canon Photopaper Pro Platinum, my choices are high and highest. If I actually go to plain paper, it'll be standard and high, or some sort of custom setting that you can set here. I generally print on highest. The difference between high and highest is mainly speed. If you choose high, you'll print faster. You will use a slightly less amount of ink, but the printer prints pretty fast. I mean, none of these inkjet printers are lightning speed. They're not like laser printers, but highest, I feel I can tell the difference in quality. If you're at a school and you're trying to print out 100 images in a single class, go down to high, right? I mean, you need to get, your work out. And I tell people, if you're printing a job and speed, it's a difference between getting a print out on time and not getting a print job out on time. Go to high. But typically I print on highest. I like to show people how to get the best results, and you will get best results on highest. Now, we have another menu here called clear coding. This has to do specifically with the ink tank that is in all of the new Canon printers that's labeled CO. CO means Chroma Optimizer. It is basically the ink without the pigment. Okay, it's a clear coating. The philosophy of the Canon engineers is, one, it's only used on a glossy or luster media setting. So I'm here on Canson Platine. It's not used on plain paper. It's not used on fine art textured or heavy. It's not used on any of the matte papers. It's only used on glossy and luster papers. It is part of the ink set, so you can't shut it off. And you don't want to shut it off. So it does juice up the colors a bit. It juices up the blacks, makes them nice and rich. But also it is designed specifically to eliminate or minimize a phenomenon that we call an inkjet print's gloss differential. And that's when you look at a print at an angle and you can see a difference between where the ink is on the page and where it isn't, especially in a black and white, where you could have a blown out highlight and you could just see paper white, right? So the philosophy is that there's something that's being coated on the paper that is ink without the pigment, and it makes your images basically look more like darkroom prints. So when you choose the combination of highest and overall, it will go on the entire printable area of the page. So if you have any blown out highlights, it will in fact cover the blown out highlights. Okay, now in this particular instance, on this particular page, you're going to see, and this is why this setting becomes kind of important. If I display printable area, what's going to happen is when you choose overall, it's not going to print on the dark gray area. So you're going to see this like 1/8, it'll go on this other white part, but it will not go on this gray part, right? Now, if you put it on auto, it's only going to go on the image area and where there's instructions to print ink. So if I had a blown out highlight, it would not print ink there if you put it on auto. So I generally set on my printer to highest quality and overall. That is my default. Now, when you look at a print at an angle, you can see a difference here. You'll see the chroma optimizer here and not here. And that bothers some people. So I say, okay, if it really bothers you and you don't mind a highlight being blown out, put it on auto then. It's your choice. That's why we have choices. Now, you see here, there is a choice for none. This is only on the new Pro 2100, 4100, 6100. You're not going to see this on the older Pro 2000 and 4000. It didn't give you an option to click off none. I have clicked off none, and the prints look horrible. I don't like them at all. So I don't recommend ever printing with none. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. It's worthwhile doing these things multiple times sometimes. I'm going to click off printable, display printable area again, because it does, like I said, freak people out. This button here, use contrast reproduction. Never hit that button, ignore it. It is a button that allowed Canon to promote that their printers are more compatible with their cameras. Basically, after you've done your image processing, if it was originally taken with a Canon camera and shot raw, the print driver here will reach in and look at your metadata in your raw file and make a micro adjustment for contrast. And I have no idea what it's doing. Why would I want my print driver to do that? I've already made my changes in Photoshop. I've already made my choices. I just want to print it. So I don't like this button. Talked to a lot of people at Canon, they're like, never hit that button. So ignore that button. Alignment, I went here earlier. Normally it's set to none, which means I could move this wherever I want. Once I do center, it locks it in the middle, and I could make my image bigger and smaller and it stays centered. If I go to center horizontally, then I can do this and it is centered horizontally. And if I go to center vertically, I can do this and it has centered it vertically. So usually people like it centered. If you wanted to have it centered horizontally, so you could just kind of scooch it up, you could do that. If you want to go down here, you can see, you could put like, oh, okay, I want 0.3 from the top, right? I could really kind of dial it in here. Oops. 0.5. I can dial in what I want there in terms of the border. I could also here specifically change the slot size if I just wanted to make that like an even 6:9. So you have those controls here. Registered layouts, these are more for when you have, if you want to have, I never really used this particular menu here. This is for when you're doing multiple images and you have different slots and stuff, you can actually register them here. Right now I'm on one slot. You could go to layout management. Usually though, I'm making my choices here and then I do my stored settings up here is how I do it. So I don't use this very often, but you can play with it if you'd like. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to center this again. Maintain slot aspect ratio. So that just means that if I have this checked, the slot's going to hug the aspect ratio of my file. Otherwise, I could do stuff like this. And then interestingly enough, they have included some cropping features. So if you wanted the slot to be, oh, let's say instead of 6:9, make it 7:9. And I now wanted to, instead of fit the image to the slot, I could fill the slot with the image. So yeah, it's going to crop off the edges a little bit, but now I have a specific size. Okay. But I usually like to maintain my aspect ratio. And I am going to, I usually set for me, maintain slot aspect ratio. That is my default. And I'm going to make this 9.4 again, just to make myself feel better. Okay, crop marks. show crop marks. So you can see now there's crop marks at the edge, and you can now reposition them. You could, let's say, do a 1/4 of an inch crop mark around, and then you could take a straight edge and cut out that image with a 1/4 of an inch. You know, just cut it out like a window. The problem with the crop marks the way they are is that if you have a rotor trim and you cut that off, then you lose this part. So hopefully in the next iteration of the program, and they are doing some updates to it, they're gonna give me a cross here so that when you cut one side off, you still have something to be able to use to continue all the way around with a rotor trim. But for right now, they have that, and then they have some other interesting other crop marks like that. And they have a double crop mark. Not sure about that one. And then they also have center crop marks. So there's a bunch of choices here. Hopefully I'm going to get they're what they call, I call them crosses. They call them dragonflies. Probably a weird Japanese translation. But I'm going to put this back to here and here. And I'm going to click it off. So if you do have it checked, it will print the crop marks. There's another setting here. If you click this, you're my favorite customer. Print margins in black. You're going to use a lot of black ink. And you know what? I do have some customers that like to see their prints like this. They do look more vibrant when you have a black border around them. I've actually advocated to have, if you're going to give me black, give me colors too. What the hell? Maybe that'd be nice to have a red or a green border around it, but usually I don't check that. Now we're in the color management part, and we're towards the end of the choices we make when we print. So we have 4 choices under color mode. I always choose use ICC profile. I never choose driver matching. I never choose black and white photo. I only choose no color correction when I am printing out color patches to make custom profiles. So Canon in this program, they did it in Print Studio Pro as well, very conveniently gives us a method for being able to print out the color patches that we need to create custom profiles without having to use an external program like the Adobe Color Print utility. So by choosing this, there is no color management associated with printing the file. And again, we only use that when we're printing out color patches for creating custom profiles. Because if we use the profile, we basically what I call creating a pair of glasses for somebody who's already wearing a pair of glasses. And I don't think any of us have ever gone to the eye doctor, put on our glasses, and then they start the tests, right? They start the test when our glasses are off. So they very conveniently provide us with no color correction, but you're never going to use that other than when you're printing color patches for creating custom profiles through our custom profile service or on your own through your own color management device. So we're always going to use ICC profile. And if you're at home on your own and you have not created a custom media file, you are going to choose a specific profile for the paper you're going to use. I've got 2000 in here. So like I said, I've made it easy for myself. I have created a custom media file. So when I put it on auto, it says Canson Platine. Here, it is automatically loading the profile based on my media type choice. Now it's important to know that media type tells the printer, again, repeating myself, what type of ink, photo black or matte black, to spray on the paper, and how much ink. Matte papers use less ink than photo black papers do. The media type will tell the printer what size core that paper is on. It'll tell it whether where to set the print head height and the vacuum strength. It's the mechanical instructions of the printer to spray the ink on the paper. And if you use the wrong one, then that is one of the things that when people come to me and say, hey, my color's off, my the texture's off, something's off, I'm not getting rich black, that's because you've used the wrong media setting. Also, the media setting on the software here has to match the media setting on the hardware, right? So when you load paper into the machine, it asks you for a media setting. You're going to want to use the media setting that you've chosen here. And I'm going to show you a new, more convenient way to work that I have discovered through doing, that I think is going to make your life a lot easier, especially on sheets. So again, I've chosen Canson Platine. I've left this on auto, which is loading the profile for Canson Platine. You can double check it by hovering over that menu. I generally choose my rendering intent as perceptual. This choice has to do with how the print driver deals with out of gamut colors in relationship to the paper profile. So if I have colors here that are beyond what the paper profile can render, perceptual is going to take that color and it's going to shrink it. It's going to crush it. It's going to do a harder calculation. It's going to bring it into gamut. And 80% of the photographers and printers that I know choose perceptual because we think it looks more natural. It looks, it preserves tonality. Relative color metric, which is the other choice, and they now have limited in the new drivers for both Canon and Epson to these two. We used to have more choices. Those choices were not ever really used in inkjet printers. So they've limited it to these two. Now, what relative color metric does is if I have a paper profile and I have a color that's way out here, and which means it's not going to render precisely, the print driver has to know what to do with it. It will figure out where the edge of that color is on the profile and it'll clip it off. So it's a matter of either scrunching or clipping. Now, only 20% of the photographers I know use relative color metric. Honestly, 99.5% of photographers have no idea why they use one or the other. They just use whatever they were told. I have done a lot of testing with a lot of people's work. I find that if people have really crazy colors that are really out of gamut and it's not working for them with perceptual, switch to relative color metric. That color might render more accurately, but if you do, you have to choose, use black point compensation. Okay, black point compensation doesn't do anything with perceptual because, as I mentioned earlier, it's taking out a gamut colors and squishing them together anyway, right? It's doing the same thing for the black. Doesn't do anything. Most people check it by default so that they don't make a mistake. If you go the relative color metric, because it's clipping it out at the edge of the profile, not going to get a rich black. So always choose black point compensation. Now, the correct answer to use, no matter what I say, is whatever looks better. If you're having a hard time nailing a color in perceptual, switch it to relative color metric, choose black point compensation. If it looks better, use that one. To me, the final choice of whether something's right or wrong is how it looks on a piece of paper. And then at the bottom here, we have some new features where you can print a header. This is a header. And you could print a footer. So you can see there's a header up there now. You could print a footer, print the print settings info. So I will use this sometimes when I'm doing testing. It automatically puts what printer did I use, what paper did I use, what the quality setting was, if I made any changes here in color settings, and I will address that in a second, and what my profile was. I've chosen auto. I know that I have a custom profile, custom media setting here that's associated with a custom profile. So I know what that means. If I had chosen something else, if I go here, it would choose that profile. And sometimes when I'm comparing profiles, that's valuable for me. And then what my rendering intent was. And then you could print the photo information, which is obviously here, the name of the file. So there's some interesting things down there. You can't change the fonts yet. This is a relatively new feature of the program. And it could be useful. I wouldn't use it all the time. Color settings, this panel here. You notice that I have it collapsed. Uncollapsed, it looks like this. This is one of the most dangerous areas of every print driver. I have actually advocated to have them remove it, but they will not do it because people want to be able to do this. And that drives me crazy. I cannot tell you how many people have been at the print lab at LACP and said, my print color is coming out horrible. And I say, check the color settings tab. If this is not set to default, you have no idea what you're doing and you could mess it up for the next person. I tell every single one of my students, every single customer that I help set up a printer, if you ever call me and tell me that your color is off and I see you've gone in here, I will cut your fingers off. This is not the place to make changes. You make changes in Photoshop or Lightroom and trust your profile. You start doing this stuff, you are going to get lost. And I can't tell you how many people tell me, well, my printer was coming out cyan, so I backed off on the cyan. Well, now it's going to apply to every single print you ever make. Defaults, collapse, ignore it. Don't ever go in there. Bad, bad place. Okay, let's see. There is a soft proofing feature here, so I could click it. It isn't as good as Photoshop and Lightroom. You should be soft proofing in Photoshop and Lightroom. And what this means is that it has now applied my paper profile to my monitor, whether it's calibrated or not. So now I am on auto, right? I'm printing with a Canson Platine profile. If I go to artistic matte canvas, I hope you can see that. You can see that now it's flatter. There's no real black. That's a horrible profile. Canvas profiles, matte profiles from the manufacturers are pretty poor. We make much better profiles. The blacks that we get out of matte paper are spectacular. But you can see everything has just been knocked down. So what it's doing is it is applying the profile. Here's CAD clear film. And it didn't look that much different. Glossy paper here. Let's come back a bit now, right? So it's applying the paper profile that you are choosing to print and overlaying it. And this is not the place you're going to make changes. So you really should have done this in Photoshop or Lightroom first. Okay, so now here we are. We have made all of our choices. And I could go here and say save current settings. I could do Canson Platine 8.5 by 11. And because I have multiple printers, Pro 4100. So now I have a stored setting right there. And so generally when I set up people's computers, when they hire me to set them up, I will go in here and very oftentimes set up what I call this a home base. If you really get confused, this is the paper you use with everything's set up. You get, I don't know where I am, go back to home base and start fresh. Okay, just try to make this easy. Now, I do not see where, okay, so my camera is still on the printer. You see that the printer has fallen asleep and it is, and I set my sleep timer to an hour. So in order to get the printer back awake, I can either tap the LCD screen or I can send the file. I'm going to go tap the LCD screen. I'm going to stand up here. And what happened to my, my light is run out of juice. Okay, so I've tapped the LCD screen, brought it back to life. We leave Canon printers on all the time. We let them go to sleep. Canon printers have automated processes that they will go through that do automatic head cleanings and nozzle checks and all that kind of stuff. Epson printers like to be shut off. Canon printers like to be left on. I set it to go to sleep. I guess I don't really need a light. I think it's bright enough over there. Although I could do this. I have more lights. There we go. That could be better. Does that show up better? Somebody say yes. It looks better to me. Mark, talk to me. Did the light look better? Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I have this all set up. Now, I am going to send this print job. And you're going to notice that it says standby here, and then it's going to say sending. You're going to see the white light blink on the printer. And guess what? It is going to ask me for the piece of paper. So I no longer load the paper, choose the media setting, do all that stuff. I now send my print job, and it is now asking me for the paper, and it says Canson Platine fiber letter. Okay, right? It's asking me for the paper. And all I'm going to do now is I can now load my paper. Now I have a sheet of Canson Platine I'm going to print on, and I want you to all take a look at this here. See how this paper is curled and it's warped? And this has to do with 100% cotton paper like this, absorbing moisture in the air and being very susceptible to environmental changes. One of the things that people call about a lot is I'm getting little marks in the corners and the edges of my paper. There must be something wrong with my printer. That is not the case. This is an unfortunate combination of environmental effects combined with the what's happening to the paper and how the printer prints. So when you load the paper, it's got to come out of the rollers. So when the paper comes out, it's going to have these little corners that are up. The print head comes across and it rubs against the corners and edges of the paper. It's something that we commonly call a head strike. And again, it's one of the most common calls that I get. Now, how do you keep this from happening? Look how warped that is, right? And it generally is going to curl towards the printable side of the paper. And the paper always goes in the printer face up. So what some people do is they just kind of do this. They just kind of, oh, sorry, got to get that in the camera, kind of curl the paper down a little bit, try to do it without damaging it. And that sometimes works. Sometimes what people do is they'll put it on the edge of the printer here. You can look at the other camera, see if I can get this in here. You'll use a glove. Sorry, I'm using my hand. They'll do this. That can sometimes work. The permanent solution for this is this device right here. This is called a D&K expression D-roller. They are not cheap. They are made in 24-inch size and 50 inches. It is a very heavy metal bar with a very stiff mylar and rubber bumpers and some Velcro. So what we do is I unroll this, and I'm going to do it on my printer here. I generally would do it on a, put this over here like this. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. Okay, so this device is primarily used for the purpose of taking the curl out of paper when you print on a roll. I use it all the time for this because I got to tell you, I've got 40 papers here and they all look like this. There's something going on in my apartment here, right? And I live in Los Angeles and it's not that humid and the temperature doesn't vary that much. But it seems like all my paper looks like this. So what I do is I put it face down. Okay, normally the curl would be the other way. You would do it face up on a roll. I put this face down, I roll it up. Okay, just leave it there for couple of seconds. I come back, and now the curl is going back the other way. I never, ever, ever get a head strike now. It saves so much time and so much paper. We sell tons of these things. Like I said, they're not cheap. The smaller one here is $249, but look, my paper no longer is curled up and I will never get a head strike. So now that my paper is like that, I'm gonna roll this up and I'm gonna put it away. Now, if my paper was extraordinarily curly, you could put it in there, roll it up, use a little Velcro, leave it in there for a couple of minutes, okay? So now I am going to see if I can do this here. That looks like it'll work. Okay, so the printer, like I said, is asking for the paper to specific media settings, so I don't have to choose it anymore. I just lift up the top cover. You'll see in here that I have a series of rollers. I have a orange line here that I can see through the grid of this, the part where the rollers are attached to. And I have an orange line here on the right, right? And as you know, any of you have these printers, there is a gray lever down here. The gray lever lifts up the roller slightly. I now can position my paper underneath the roller. I align the top edge of the paper on the orange line that I can see through the grid and on the orange line on the right. If I want a little extra help, I can push the button up here, suction, and increase the suction. So it holds the paper now down into place a little bit more. I usually don't have to do it because I loaded 10,000 sheets of paper in these machines. I put the gray lever down, close the top cover, paper is going to load, and the printer is going to print. And I didn't have to choose any media settings. It's automatically doing everything now. So now when I teach the class, this is going to be the workflow. We're going to send files. You're going to be choosing the media setting in the software, and the hardware is going to set itself. It's going to be much easier, especially when we're printing on lots of different papers, because you might send Hanamilia Agave, and I'm going to have a lab assistant there who's going to be loading paper, and that person will now know exactly what paper to load. So I find it a really super convenient way to work. So the printer is now printing. Remember, on these large format printers, pieces of paper just don't fly out at you. When it's done printing, it will say the job is completed, and then we'll pick up, lift up the gray lever and I'll pull it out and I'll show you that. So I can move this back a little bit. Show you where the gray, you can see where the gray lever is. And that's the way to get perfect prints every time. Ta-da! Okay, let's see, what else? Under other settings, kind of an advanced, you've got some other things. If you're from overseas and you want millimeters rather than inches, you could change that here. If you're doing borderless printing, you can tell the printer how much of an extension of the image, because in borderless printing, you always lose a bit. You lose about 1/8 of an inch. You can adjust the amount that you're going to lose. It's got us overprint the edges of the paper in one way or another. So you can't get away from it. It's just a matter of how much you want. I usually leave it on standard. For those of you who have, oh, actually, hold on, let's go here. Always print in finest quality settings. Some people check that. Finest quality is even more slower than highest. I generally don't see a need for this unless you're printing very, very fine, high quality text. Not a big fan of finest quality. I've never really seen a difference between finest quality and highest quality. Unidirectional printing, basically, it's only going to print, it's going to slow it down dramatically, unless you're having problems with ink drying on the surface of your print, I wouldn't recommend necessarily hitting that button. Add update media information. This is used when we're updating the program with media files. There's a whole procedure you go through, and at the very end, you would see that all the work you did isn't here yet in the menu. When you click add update media information, it takes the media information from the printer and brings it into professional print and layout. This is the last step when you're creating new media files. Output method. This is really kind of exciting. Right now I'm in print mode. So when I push print, print comes out. And as you can see, it's done. And I come over here and the LCD screen says gently support the paper and lift the release lever. So here's my print. Ta-da! Perfect print every time. So what I could do also, though, is the printer has all of these large format printers, 24-inch and larger, have hard drives in them. I could print this file to any number of 29 boxes. Okay, and so if I wanted to print this, I could call it Golden Pavilion, and tell it what paper I used and what size, and I could then retrieve that from the job menu on the printer. So if there's files that you print all the time, you don't even need to print them from the computer. You could just go to the LCD screen on the printer and choose the job in the job menu. And as long as it's on the same paper, the same, using the same profile, all that stuff, you just push print. You know, you can tell it how many prints you want to make from the LCD screen on the printer. So that is a pretty cool feature. And I do that, let's say I've got, you know, always printing out patches for profiles. So in job box number 2, I've got a bunch of print jobs in there where I'm printing just on highest density art paper for matte papers or Pro Platinum. And when I'm doing large batches of profiles, I just tell it I want 10 of them, and it just prints them. And if I'm especially doing them on sheets, it'll just keep on asking me for sheets of paper. In custom settings, I showed you display printable area. That's the most important part of these. I usually also check display images in high definition. Sometimes low resolution images can be pixelated, so I check that all the time. These other buttons are checked by default: reflect color adjustment and result preview. That's if you're making color setting changes. And then when you use this as a plugin for Photoshop, this is basically saying when you start the program up from Photoshop, the current image that you have will be the image that loads first in professional print and layout. And then I usually leave all of this the same in terms of display matching. And then I never ever have touched anything in here. It hasn't really been relevant to what I've been doing. And I like to have the control of working in here. So this isn't, I mean, you could play around in here, but it isn't an integral area that we should be working in. Okay, so let's see. Did I miss anything? Let's see. Okay, so there is a minus, right, for viewing on the screen. This is a percentage, so you could do that, or fit to screen. This is your orientation. So some people are printing images that are vertically oriented. This does not have anything to do with how the image is going to print. This is just how the image is being displayed on the screen. That's it.
Eric?
That is it.
So
now, questions? Any questions now?
Okay, Eric, can you hear me?
I can, Jane.
Okay. When you're printing out of Photoshop, do you need to flatten your image first?
Good question. So in Print Studio Pro, you did. They fixed that now.
Wow.
You don't have to flatten your image now. Very good question. But you know what? I really recommend you flatten your image. Okay. It's just better because if your image isn't flattened, it's really big, right? And there's a lot of air in there that isn't contributing to print quality. So typically speaking, I tell people to flatten your image and convert it to a TIFF file. There's no real reason to leave it as a PSD file. But you're not going to get any printing anomalies like you used to. They really fixed that in this program. So, you know, when people would see at the bottom and it would like have this weird strip of color, and it doesn't happen anymore. They fixed it.
Good to know. Also, I have one other question. With a finished print, do you put any kind of protective coating on Canon inks? Do they need that?
So the chroma optimizer is not a protective coating. It is literally there for the purpose of eliminating gloss differential and bronzing and metamerism and all those types of things. There are some sprays that are available. Hahnemühle UV protective spray is one. Premier's Print Shield is another. We sell those too. There is a lot of them out there. They're all pretty much the same. I recommend if you do want to spray your prints to use one that is specifically for inkjet photograph, inkjet printing. There are fixatives, that people say, oh, it's the same stuff from the art store. I've been told it's not exactly the same stuff. My rule is if I sell a print, I'm going to spray it. The prints that you see in my portfolio, I only spray the matte prints. And the reason is that sprays on all paper, the reason to spray them is to keep the inkjet receiving layers from continuing to absorb airborne contaminants. Okay. I have literally seen prints yellow because, and in fact, it happened very recently to me. In fact, it was a couple of months ago. I have a guy who's a painter, who's doing reproductions of his artwork, chose Hahnemühle Photo Rag Satin to print on, which is a gorgeous paper. And it has optical brighteners in it. And, many of you know my opinions about optical brighteners, but it has optical brighteners in it. And this only happens with papers with optical brighteners, okay? He took his prints and he put them in his flat file, a wooden flat file that he personally made. He handcrafted it and he polyurethaned it. And the polyurethane outgassed and absorbed into the paper and turned all of his prints yellow. And he freaked out. Mm-hmm. If he had sprayed them, that wouldn't have happened. Now, all was not lost. All was not lost. He called me up and I said, you know what? You can make them white again. He's like, how? Oh, I got locked up there. Hold on. Video, stop video, start video. Okay, I'm back. I said, take one of the, is it sunny there? Because he was in actually Virginia when it was raining a lot there. He said, this is our first sunny day in like 2 months. I'm like, take one of the prints and take it outside. Leave it in the sun for an hour. He's like, are you really? Yeah, call me back in an hour. He called me back and he goes, what kind of voodoo did you just show me? Print was perfectly white again. So the polyurethane outgassed went into the print and it affected the optical brighteners. And then when he put it back out in the sun, it bleached it back again. So if you have any yellow prints, putting them back out in bright sunlight can bring them back. It's interesting. The sun is a very powerful bleach, believe it or not. Light is. But it also shows that spraying your prints is really a good thing for archival permanence. Prints are very susceptible to airborne contaminants, and I definitely recommend it. On matte prints, if you do it right, you get the added benefit of making them a bit more resistant to scratches and scuffs, which is why I do that for all the matte prints in my portfolio, because I'm obviously having thousands of people handle them over a period of time. I don't spray my semi-gloss prints. And the reason is that the spray can change the texture and reflectivity of semi-gloss prints. It does not, if you do it right, affect the color or reflectivity or anything on a matte paper. So for the purposes of my portfolio, I don't spray my prints because I want you to feel, the whole point of it is to feel the paper. But if I sell a print, yeah, I spray it. I want it to last a long time, and it will improve the archival permanence.
Do you have a spray that you like for your matte prints?
It's the same spray. It's the UV, Hahneman's UV protective spray or Premier Art Print Shield. I don't necessarily prefer one over the other, although I like the spray nozzle on the Hahnemann a little better. It's a couple of dollars more. All these products are the same chemical components, maybe in different proportions, but I tend to like the nozzle on the Hahnemann. It sprays a little differently. It's got a little better coverage. But then I have some people that like the Premier just because it's a couple of dollars cheaper and essentially the same stuff. But I also recommend doing it outdoors because it does smell. It is a kind of a varnish or lacquer-based product. You will get high if you, or you'll get dizzy or sick or whatever. So I would definitely do it outside.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so any other questions? This was a ton of information. Like Janice said, it's going to be posted on the LACP YouTube channel. Obviously, to me, the best way to learn how to use any program or printer is to use it, right? I mean, you can't be afraid of it. Especially these larger printers can be very intimidating. I will reiterate my philosophy, which is it is a big, dumb printer. Device. It doesn't do anything unless you tell it to. And if you choose, I mean, people call me up and go, it's not printing right. It's printing a little tiny, a big image on a little tiny piece of paper. Well, that's because you chose the wrong paper size. You chose to have an image that was, it's cutting off on the right. Well, you've done this. You've, have the image bleeding into the non-printable area. Oh, my print isn't oriented right. You've got to get down and understand orientation, and understand that there's a difference between, a landscape oriented piece of paper and a portrait oriented piece of paper, or like I say, vertical and horizontal. So
Eric,
yes.
Eric, are you going to, or do you have a cheat sheet like you did for Canon Print Pro Studio?
I haven't created one yet. And the reason is it took a lot of time to do that Print Studio Pro one.
Yeah.
And then they changed the program and I got to redo it again.
Oh.
And there's just so many more features in this. I kind of felt like a video would be better, right? There's just so much in there that, and people would get that cheat sheet. I mean, and it was basic setup, which I could do. I could say, look, if you're doing this, printing this, you could just do this. But I got to tell you, even during COVID, even during when we were locked down, and now I am so busy every single day working with people, it is hard to really sit down and focus on writing instructions because it's got to be so specific, right?
Yeah, it's just so helpful when you're setting down to print. Even there's certain things I look up even now, even though I've been using this for 3 years, rather than going to video and trying to find that spot in the video and go back and forth from the program to the video.
I understand. Yeah,
sorry,
when the program first came out, I did a manual, and then they changed everything. I mean, everything about the program changed. I'm like, oh, I got to do this again. And I know they're coming out with another one. So I'll tell you that. I'll give you this. When the next version of the software comes out, then I'll write the manual. And that shouldn't be too far off because I know they're working on it.
All right.
All right, I have a question, Eric. Can I import my user templates from Lightroom into this?
Nope, you cannot. And even worse, if you have this program on another computer, you can't export the stored settings into another computer. And I've asked them for that. I've actually asked it in Print Studio Pro. And I would love to be able to export and be able to import them into another computer because I have labs that use this. And they're like, okay, I've done all this work here. Can't I just import it onto another computer? And the answer is no, you can't. But that's another very good question.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just one more thing.
I try to do these things in 2 hours, and I usually go, I've gotten better at it. I get it within 2 hours.
I just have, because I haven't, I took that last workshop you did at LACP right before everything closed.
Mhm.
And I know we printed and we used paper that was already in the large printer. So when we are renting time at LACP, we're going to be bringing if we want to use a roll, we need to bring our own roll of paper, whatever it is we want to use.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll learn how to load it.
Yeah, I supply paper for the purpose of the class, and I have, brought other papers there and such, but when you're doing your own printing, yes, you'll bring your own paper, and I'm trying to load up as many profiles on these new printers that I think people are going to use. So,
Okay, thanks.
yes, absolutely. Okay, anything else?
Hi, Eric. How are you? It's Marta.
Hi, Marta. I'm doing
Hi.
fantastic. I don't know. You tell me. How am I doing? Am I doing okay?
Yeah, great. So I have an old Mac and I'm on High Sierra and I'm thinking about getting the Pro 1000. On the High Sierra 10.13.6 is this new program with the Pro 1000 compatible with my old computer?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, I don't think it's compatible with Sierra though. So if it's High Sierra, yeah.
Yeah. So it's High Sierra. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The Pro 1000 has been out now for about 5 years. So, and this program, if you go to, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Go back to Canon's website. There we go. History. Let's see. Actually, we should go to, go back to Canon USA support and type in Pro 1. I mean, if you ever want to see compatibility, oops, too many ones. Go here, drivers and downloads, and then you can go to High Sierra and see that the drivers are the same and the software is all the same. So 1.2.2 is the current version of the program, and it solved a bunch of bugs, and there'll hopefully be a 1.3 or whatever version pretty soon. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mark, any questions? I'm going to pick on you.
Yes, I have a question.
I knew it.
I copied the plugin from Photoshop 2020 to 21, but it's still grayed out on the menu, on the automate menu, in the 2021 Photoshop. Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, go back to Canon. So go back to here, go back to your applications folder,
Mhm.
go to Canon Utilities, go to Professional Print and Layout, and actually use the installer and install it.
Okay.
So you got to double click on this. Obviously, like I said, it kind of, there's like a little link program that goes in there. So it found Lightroom, it found 2020. So you're gonna have to go here, no, click here, go to next, go to Photoshop 64-bit, browse. Okay, go to applications, Photoshop 2021 plugins folder, and click open here, and it will install it there. Like I said, some people can drag and drop the plugin, some people cannot. But by reinstalling it there, you should be fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And again, no matter what you do, you can always use it as a standalone application. Now, one bug that I've been running into is people using Apple computers that are running the M1 chip. Some people have not been able to use Professional Print and Layout as a plugin for Photoshop on the very latest version of Adobe Photoshop CC 2021. If you go back in your Creative Cloud a couple of versions back, you can use it. So this is the problem with all of this stuff. You've got hardware, you've got software that runs the hardware, you've got a computer that runs different operating systems and different versions of programs and different chips, and it's all got to work. And software, unfortunately, doesn't write or correct itself. So that is, to me, a known bug that I have been able to reproduce, that I've reported to Canon. But it could be more of a Photoshop problem than a Canon problem, right? Because it's not working with a new version of Photoshop. So these are the things where I encourage people to contact me, and we'll try to work through it. But the thing I like about this program is that you can always use it as a standalone and export your file or save it and be able to drag and drop it into it without being dependent on using it as a plugin. So see, I do that, oop, go back there, and just take my file and go bloop. And this is always also great because I have people that use other Adobe products like InDesign and Illustrator and such, and it doesn't integrate with them, right? But I've been at schools where they buy these printers and they want to print, so they export their file as a JPEG, and they're like, how do I print? I go, just do this, drag and drop it in there. So I find that using it like this is my preferred way of using it. Just get your file, drag and drop it in there. Now, if the file's bigger, having the driver make it smaller is fine now. It doesn't have to be exactly 300. It could be greater pixel density, but making the image larger, right? A smaller image larger in the print driver, that becomes more problematic. And in which case, people have asked me, what program that I use, that I've tried, that I prefer for increasing the size or up-resing images. And I've tried Photoshop's Preserve Details 2.0, which is built into the program, which is most people's preferred way of up-resing files. I've tried Alien Skin Blow Up. I've tried On-One Resize. And you know what? I found that all three of those methods are pretty equivalent. The one that stood out to me in terms of being a little better, I'm not saying like it's 300% better, but I'm saying I got more out of it with an image that had fine details and text, was Topaz, which is the name of the company, AI Gigapixel, or AI, I to both. I have used that a lot, and I can tell that good, better, and images that are really bad, it makes them look worse. I mean, it's kind of a garbage out. I can also tell you that it is very memory intensive, and it will take down your computer in terms of you won't be able to do anything else while it's running. But when it's done, it's pretty amazing. I've been really happy with it. So you can usually go to our website and download a 7-day trial. Goes on sale all the time. You know, I think normally it's $99.
Okay, so it seems, I don't know if it's like politics or what, but it seems like 240 DPI versus 300 DPI, like different, professionals swear by one versus the other. So you've mentioned 300, as I've been swayed back to 240 over the last year or two. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that I live for. It's a great question. So 240 is the default in Lightroom. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like Lightroom for printing, right? It defaults everything to 240. And it doesn't correspond to anything. There's no reason for that DPI anymore. It seems to be a harken back to the original PPI resolution in Canon cameras on many of the original digital cameras. So I don't know why it defaults to 240. Now you can change that in your preferences, and the PPI resolution that you should choose depends on your purpose. Okay. So if you were posting images on a website, it would be 72. Okay. If you're printing and you're using a Canon printer, it should be 300. If you're printing and you're on an Epson printer, it should be 360. Now, why? Here's the reason. Okay. You want the PPI resolution of your file to be a number that is easily divided into the native resolution of the printer. Now, what that means is Epson printers are 2880 by 1440. Half of 1440, 720. Half of 720, 360. Bingo, your magic number. You could even go down to 270. You can go down to 90 DPI increments. You don't really want to go below 180 when you're printing. 360 is better on an Epson printer. Canon printers, 2400 by 1200. Half of 1200, 600. Half of 600, 300. Bingo, your magic number. Okay. So, but also in today's print drivers, the real rule of thumb is you can have a higher pixel density. It could be 480, it could be 600 or whatever, and it'll still be fine. It isn't like the old days where you would start seeing banding and all sorts of issues. But you don't want to go too far down in PPI resolution when you're printing, because that's when you start, the image starts breaking up and you start seeing all sorts of pixelization. You don't want to, have a screen resolution image printed. It's just not going to look sharp. So those are the reasons for those PPIs, and 240 doesn't really correspond to anything anymore, which is why I don't like using it with professional print and layout as a plugin, because when you export it, no matter what you do, it exports it at 240.
Even if you change it in your preferences to 300?
It in your preferences, yeah. It doesn't, Lightroom was never really designed as a high quality printing program. It was designed as a convenient program for doing 90% of what Photoshop does. Photoshop is more designed for printing. And so what I would recommend is export your file. And if you need help, I'm there for you. Set up a standard export for printing and just use it as a drag and drop program for your Canon printer. I'm assuming that everybody here has a Canon printer, which is why you're, attending this.
Yes.
So if you have an Epson printer, there's Epson print layout and it does it, you know, you can use it there too. So.
It's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
12:02,
much.
Janice, we made it. We did it.
Janice, you're muted.
We did. Yes, we did. We did.
So thank you all for this. This was fantastic. You all asked the right questions. And like we said, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. And we can use this now as a bit of an educational resource. So, and you're right, Deborah. Are you still there? She dropped out. I think she's gone. I will endeavor on the next version of the software to create a cheat sheet. But as you can see, this is a very rich and powerful software. And it also very much simplifies workflow, I think, even though it has a lot of features in it. So thank you all for coming. Is there any last words? Thank you, LACP, for hosting this. Thank you all for being members. And I hope to all see you as full-size, three-dimensional, breathing human beings one of these days soon.